Are you a business leader looking for next? I was. Are you an athlete transitioning to next? I wasn't. If you're looking for your next, this is the space for you. This is the Business Athlete Performance Lab. Hi, I'm Chief Bilous, and this is Live in the Lab. All right. A little bit of weirdness in front of the camera there for anybody who's watching, because I'm like, hey, where's the button? Where's the button? I can't get it going. How did you go viral on TikTok? You were on America's Got Talent. How much do you get paid to be on AGT? Oh, you didn't get paid. Keith and Steve here in Live in the Lab.
You're a great interviewer. I love it.
48 miles, 48 hours. And not just once. You ain't seen nothing yet. I hit 50 last night, and I'm like, yeah, things are a little different than they were 10 years ago. So trust me, things are to keep. You have no time for the BS that much of society seems to put on the table. Why is that? What you're talking about is real right now. There's just no bullshit here, but it's just real. We brought you in with some Marley. I said, Joseph, let's talk music for a second. You said, Keith, oldies, 60s, 70s, and 80s. I've never talked to a sir before. Why are you a sir? In many ways, we're the same story. I came from nothing. You came from nothing. I think the old saying goes that if you want a trophy, you climb Everest. If you want respect, you climb K2. I've built an AI myself, and it's pretty fascinating when you can have a conversation with yourself with your own knowledge. Have you done that before? Why are we rushing to make these tools if all they're going to do is hurt humanity? Does the world need an Oppenheimer moment with AI?
What a fun show.
There we go. Oh. I like the sound of that. What's going on, Business Athlete Nation? It's all my BAPL maniacs out there. How's that vitamin G here with you today on a Wednesday? Maybe you wrote in your vitamin G urinal? Oh. Maybe Keith's got some merch coming. Courtesy of some ideas floating around. I don't know. Vitamin G journals? I don't know. Vitamin G hats? From the Business Athlete Performance Lab? I don't know. Just throwing ideas on the table. So, hey, midweek. What an encore show we dropped yesterday with Ari Mizell. If you are feeling overwhelmed, we went live with Ari yesterday on a rebroadcast, an encore episode, as we like to call it. And we dropped it today, this morning, 7 a.m. Inside.bapl.ai. That's inside.bapl.ai. That's where you'll find all of our content. We drop every morning around 7 a.m. Central. So if you missed the live show, boom, we chop it up into chunks. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, 15 minutes, 30, the whole show. Put it into a collection. Go to inside.bapl.ai. Just focus on that. Inside.bapl.ai. They get you the content delivered to you. So there you go with Ari Mizell. Hey, coming up today, we have a professional track athlete. A professional track athlete showing up today. Stephen Benedict. So we're excited to welcome Stephen into the lab coming up today. Do you have a message for our audience you want to get out there? Maybe you have a message for your audience. Maybe you have a message for your audience's audience. Maybe you have a message that you want to get out there to your audience's audience. You get the picture. Why don't you partner with us? You see we're committed. You see we're honest. You see we come to work every single day with integrity. We ask good questions. Partner with us. Discover the BAPL effect. There's nothing else like it, as you're seeing, as it's showing up on the feeds across social media. Nothing else like it. We're doing something new here. We're celebrating something new. And we don't do echo chambers here in the lab. We invite you to have an honest chat. So if you have a message you want to get out there, let's come and talk about it. And what I commit to you is an authentic conversation. We're not going to do a pre-meeting where I have to agree to scripted questions. We can set guardrails, but guardrails around perhaps both sides. I'm not going to throw you under the bus, because I wouldn't want to be thrown under the bus. And I think if you go back and look at our previous 50 shows, I just want to have a good, honest chat. So what I would commit to you is if you have a narrative, a story you want to have told, come sit in the chair. Get your message, get your story out. We don't do pre-scripted questions. We do honest, fireside chats. We tell your truth. We ask good questions. We have good dialogue. And my commitment to you is to make you, your company, your brand feel safe sitting in the lab. So you can get your honest question out. Listen, why? Because that's what I want for myself. Do we have our flaws? Do you have your flaws? Do I have my flaws? Well, of course we do. We're all not perfect, but we want to be treated fairly, not in an echo chamber where we all have to agree to everything. We're not looking to pick a fight. We're looking to have a good, honest conversation. So why don't you join me? Join me in the lab. Let's have an interesting chat about you, about your company, about your product, about what you stand for. Every human has a story to tell. They just need to find someone to share it with. And I'm happy to be that guy. Because as I'm showing you, I show up every single day here in the lab, Monday to Friday. And if I want you to show up for me, then you're going to expect me to show up for you. Go get our content delivered to your inbox, inside.bapl.ai, to show that commitment on a daily basis. Let's partner together. Let's do some work together. All right, so there's enough of my rant here today. I've taken enough of the monologue up. Let's flip our attention to the guy on the screen. You know how this works. We're going to run the old pre-trailer. It's about a minute and a half. We're going to get introduced to Stephen Benedict, and Stephen and I are going to sit around the lab and get into some good chat about being a business athlete. As long as there's breath in your lungs, the race can still be won. Today I'm honored to welcome a man whose life story is as inspiring as it is challenging. Stephen Benedict. Stephen's journey is marked by adversity, from abandonment and abuse to family deceptions, untimely deaths, and struggles with drugs and alcohol. Yet, he rose above these odds, channeling his experiences into a focus that led him to success on the track. His life is a vivid illustration of how the principles of athletics can be applied to overcome life's hurdles. Stephen's rules for running, which extend far beyond the track, are universal lessons in focus, resilience, and determination. Stephen's experience stretches across diverse realms, from leadership and corporate productivity to foster care reform and human optimization. His narrative isn't just about personal triumph, it's about leveraging experience to foster social and emotional awareness and drive positive change. Stephen's philosophy of leadership is as profound as it is impactful. He believes in empowering communities not for recognition, but to build something genuinely transformative. To him, leadership is about encouragement, motivation, and the ability to uplift and inspire those around us. Join us as we delve into Stephen's extraordinary life story. Tune in to Live in the Lab today to hear from a man who's faced life's toughest challenge head on and emerged with invaluable lessons on resilience, leadership, and the power of the human spirit. Hello, Mr. Stephen Benedict.
How are we doing, Keith?
Good. How are you, my friend?
Well, thank you for the very in-depth intro.
We like to entertain and inform, as I say here in the lab, not just inform and bore.
I hear you.
So we got to add a little bit of entertainment value to the whole thing. Where do you join us here today from?
I'm in California.
Whereabouts?
Santa Monica.
Oh, nice. Born, raised, and bred?
No, East Coast, born and raised.
East Coast,
New York, New Jersey area.
So now we've set the seed for a journey and story of Stephen's life. So that seed was planted in Jersey.
Yes. Yeah, very early. About southern Jersey. Moved up and down around the East Coast for countless amounts of years until I was adopted at the age of 8, and along with my brother, 8 and 6.
Yeah, 8 and 6, you were adopted. And where were you living on the East Coast when you were adopted?
So originally we were in Union City, which is a very small city down south a little bit. And then after we were adopted, we moved from Randolph, which was even more south. And then we moved up towards Fort Lee. Fort Lee is first town across the George Washington Bridge. You have to go through Fort Lee in order to get to New York. So that's where we were adopted. That's where we laid our roots and were raised and by two great individuals and put us on the map, so to say.
But you said you were adopted at 8, yet your story truthfully starts much sooner than that and much earlier than that.
Oh, yeah.
Which is which is the reason really. So when I did my homework and research into Stephen, I'm going, okay, at 8, he's adopted.
Mhm.
Story starts, interesting story that starts. And then I go back and read the prologue to that, what happens between 0 and 8. And I says to myself, oh, really need to sit down and have a chat with Stephen.
Yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot there that happened in that. I like to say that my childhood started at 8. I would say my pre growth period to becoming an adult started from very early
Yeah.
to about 8. So all those kind of those nuances of building resilience and self-sufficiency and self-protective mechanisms, they were all built beforehand. Um, just a little backstory on that. We were living in and out of motel rooms when we were younger. We didn't have a stable life situation. My mother was unstable. My father died when I was 2. I have no recollection of him whatsoever. We have gotten several different stories on that. That can be talked at a little later. But uh, then my mother started dating another man, and he saw fit to lay out his frustrations on us whenever it was feasible for him. So it was a lot of abuse and neglect and a lot of drugs and alcohol going on in that situation. As I said, we were living in and out of motel rooms, and it went on for quite a while until my grandparents found out about the situation, and they decided to take us in for a very short period of time. Obviously, 2 elderly adults trying to take care of 2 toddlers is really unstable and insufficient for them. So our next best bet was to go into foster care. Mind you, that at this point, this was my second time in foster care. I was put in foster care at roughly the age of 4 months, and that was the same thing with my mother. It was just very unstable. Then I was put back into her hands, and then my brother was born, and that's when the whole second chapter of the story kind of came around. And like I said, we were put back into foster care, moved up and down around the East Coast for 6 years, 6, 7 years, and we were finally blessed to be adopted by 2 great individuals. My mother was a second grade teacher. My father was an ex-Marine, fought in the Vietnam War, then moved on to working in the New York Stock Exchange. So that was like our initial space of having a second chance at life, is what I like to say.
Yeah. Then you go on to that second chance in life and you have a very successful athletic career, Stephen.
Yeah, a lot of things opened up. I was exposed to a lot of things, and I use that word exposure very heavily. And I think that's a
Mhm.
very important word for all of us is exposure. And my parents were great at that. My mother, especially, 2 great dynamics. My mother being very strong and a bold woman, involved in everything, super protective of us, an aspect in which we didn't have when we were younger. And my father really being the joy of life and having that aspect of just loving the day to day, loving to spend time with us, very family oriented, and just was, we called he had a white beard, looked like Kenny Rogers, but everybody around Christmas time would think he was Santa Claus. So he got asked to be Santa Claus. But their dynamic was especially important to our growth and our just well-roundedness. My parents got us into everything from sports to music to art to education. So it was really laid the foundation for us to really plant some good seeds to grow and to really move in a different trajectory than what we were going
Mhm.
from when we were younger. And sports playing a very big part. My first sport was I was put into judo. I did martial arts for 10 years. I loved it. It laid the foundation of all of my discipline and all of my due diligence and my focus and commitment and just laying a baseline for things to bounce off of.
I would suggest to you that that baseline was set even earlier, as you share with me that your
Mhm.
father was in the military. Your mother gave you immense love. You went from a situation where You had no structure, you had no systems, you had no clarity, you didn't know what tomorrow would bring, to this woman who loved you immensely, unconditionally, and so did your father, who clearly brought this structured, systematic approach to life. You bring those two together, you give these boys this love, you set them free in an athletic environment. It's hard not to see then the success. When you look back in hindsight, Stephen, it's hard not to actually see it coming to life, isn't it? Because you grew up so fast for those first 8 years, you needed two people to wrap around you, some love, some structure and system, and set you free, right?
Without a doubt, yes, and that's very true. We needed the components that what we weren't getting
Yeah.
watered with when we were younger, and
Mm-hmm.
those are super crucial in growth mechanisms for children. They need the love, they need the security, they need the support, they need the constant affirmations and things like that in order to know that they're moving in the right direction, and they're in an environment in which they're able to grow. We weren't in that. It was more of my previous environment was more of me having to be this father figure for my younger brother, which I had no capabilities to do and I
Mm-hmm.
had no rights to do. But I was thrown into it, so I had no choices. So having to be self-protective and be super aware of my surroundings, having trust problems, being a really good listener into what people are saying and how people reacted and what my environment looks like. Like those all things are things that are not really that they're not really that honed in on as children, right? We're more free, willing, go lucky, enjoy being a child, have recess play and stuff like that, do that type of stuff. Like that is a child's environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not having to worry about that other stuff because they're handed over to our parents.
Mm-hmm.
So that was handed to me. So it was a very accelerated childhood. And then it was like acceleration for those first 8 years and then backed off. And then I was able to pass the baton to my parents.
Mm-hmm. Stephen, share with the audience what kept you going during your toughest times as a youth. Then what's kept you going?
I think trauma is an amazing tool, right? I think that a certain amount of trauma in everybody's life is super efficient for them to grow and to be resilient and to do that. And I've had several situations. I've probably had a lot more trauma than most in my early years. And that has been a space in which, yes, it's been a very hard roller coaster or a lot of a ride emotionally, mentally, physically, all those things. But my biggest aspect in which I've been very aware of is been the contrast of life, right? So, yes, have I had a lot of tough situations? Have a lot of loss and abandonment and a lot of mistrust and all those things? Yes. But I also know that if I look in other directions, I can go here in LA and I can go downtown LA and there's a huge homeless problem, huge drug problem, and huge people that are in a debilitating, deteriorating life. And I can look at my life and look at that, and that really puts me in a humble position and know that I've gotten through a lot with a lot of help and a lot of guidance and a lot of hands-on from you, whoever you believe in. But I'm a Christian. And I believe in God, and I definitely, most definitely believe that His hands have been on me and have guided me through a lot of situations and brought me through. So in those types of things, it's that contrast of life. I'm always trying to see of like, yes, in the moment, in my situation, I may not be happy. I may not want to go through this, but there could be always worse, right? And it's temporary, right? Our current situations are temporary. They're not our final destinations. So that's something I try to hold on to, and it's been a work in progress constantly. As I've grown, I've become better at it, and I've become more self-aware at it, and be able to keep an even keel and not try to overstress and let my emotions run things. So those are the kind of key factors that have kept me going. And then also motivation of honoring my parents, honoring things in which they stood for and what they sacrificed for me to just leave a good just be a good man and to to just make an impact.
Mhm, mhm. Stephen, you've told the story many times. You've shared your story many times.
Mhm.
When did that light go on in your head, in your life, to say it's important for me to share my story and to talk about my story? Was it for your own healing, for your own purpose, or was it as much because you wanted to help others?
I think that kind of came on the radar a couple years ago, and it was always kept on lock and key for a long
Mhm,
time.
mhm,
I wasn't very good at sharing it. I'm very good at suppressing, and I'm very good at not letting my emotions show and handling things in private in my own time, and not showing weakness, which I think is a big issue for men, especially in this society, having that piece. So that plays a part too. But that changed for me. And when I first started speaking about it and people started hearing about it, their interest peaked very highly and very fast. And I had to be very careful on how I presented it to the world and to people and to organizations and to anybody that being used as a platform for hope and resilience and striving and all these things. Whereas when I first started speaking about it, I found, and this came to me and from a couple of close friends and things, is that when we first tell our stories, and yes, we've lived them and we're familiar with them, but in order to make them come across as pieces of who we've become because of them and
mhm,
not from a standpoint of victim mentality. Oh, poor me, this all happened to me. I deserve this. There's two different distinct ways to tell a story, right? And when I first started telling it, it came out like that. It came out more of a victim mentality. It's, this isn't fair, right? I've lost two sets of parents before I was 28 years old. Who does that? Or like, why is that all happening to me? I didn't deserve all that, or I've gone through this and that, and on all these things. And then so that narrative needed to be switched, and it needed to be switched of, yes, I went through this, but I learned this, and this is the person I became. And these are the things that I can relate to other people's stories and what they're going through because I've gone through so much of things of emotional and drugs and alcohol and abandonment and lack of love and abuse and all these things. These are universal kind of emotions that I think are very common and are put behind the scenes because people don't know how to talk about them.
mhm.
So that's where the shift in my narrative came for me to utilize my story as a platform and a catalyst to help others instead of a victim space.
I think it's important to share our stories. And I applaud you for finding that courage to not only share it, but then also have the awareness, Stephen, to recognize that it ain't coming out the right way right now. And I gotta switch the narrative because people are looking at me like, huh? So I,
Mhm.
I applaud that for you as well, because but at the end of the day, just to step up to the plate and say, I have something that's very personal to talk about,
Mhm.
um, is empowering, because you also said a few moments ago that a lot of gentlemen listen to this thing, also have stories perhaps like you do, or I have, and have been reluctant to share them or want to talk about them. And we've always said, hey, come to the lab and share them with us, or call me or send me a text, because that's the kind of environment we're trying to create here for guys like you and I, as a safe space, the locker room, the lab, to chat about things that we normally probably wouldn't talk about. So you made the switch to the narrative where you're like, okay, this one ain't working, this one's working. And the more human, the more raw, the more authentic you became, the more empowered you became. It's like your superpower, isn't it, Stephen?
Yeah, it definitely, there's a lot of, when we tell our stories, there's a lot of self reflection. right? And you have to revisit situations in which we've put in the back burner or we've put in the closet because we don't want to deal with them. We're past that. And the famous saying, our skeletons in the closets. And when we don't deal with that stuff, they resurface and they will resurface. And it has plenty of times for me. I've had to go to counseling. I've had therapy. I've had situations where I've had to have anger management type of tweaks and things done and to discuss certain things that affect my other relationships. It's not only about telling the story, but it's about through us revisiting those situations and our own personal narratives that we find our growth and we're able to evolve and become more and understand where the connections are from our childhood to who we become now. And all of those nuances along the way become our biomarkers in which bring us up to our present moments. So it's a constant work in progress, right? It's not a one and done deal. Um, every 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, we become different people, different things become our trigger points, and our emotional stability is always volatile. And being able to handle those things in a copacetic manner, it really helps us to evolve as men. And finding stable, good, intelligent, emotionally intelligent men nowadays is a very tough thing because we're always fighting these internal battles that don't come out so much. So that's become a very important piece for me too. I love speaking in men's circles about those things and about my own story, but then also being able to listen, right? And being able to slow down and not speak or interject or throw out my pieces and my 2 cents, and giving a space to listen and hear, and then saying, hey, I can relate to that. And this is how I handle this situation if it helps.
The greatest experience for me personally, Stephen, has been starting this show because of what you have just said, is that it has enabled me to become a much better listener, a much better communicator, because it's forced me to really listen even more than I did before. And it's really allowed me to connect with the person I'm speaking with. But you have been speaking over the last few minutes about an underlying theme that's come up over numerous occasions in the previous 50 shows. We go live every single day, Stephen. Every single day I do this.
Wow, that's a lot of shows.
Yeah. It's this theme of identity. One of my partners in the lab here is a gentleman who's played in the NHL, played pro sports, played hockey 13 years. From 5 years old, all he wanted to do was be a professional hockey player. He plays in front of 20,000 people chasing the Stanley Cup, and then he finds himself on Friday nights playing beer league hockey with a few guys, right? We had a UFC fighter here in the lab here a couple of days ago who's going to be on the show here in a couple of days. Ever since his whole life, all he was going to be was a fighter, right? And now they wrestle with this theme of identity. And I'm glad you said just that. That's what my head is thinking. The pieces that you can carry with you, excuse me, because I think to somebody listening right now who's going through that kind of that identity thought in their head and either out walking right now or just thinking about what's kind of going on in their life, you are the best example of not being identified by a thing. Like your life, those identities you've carried throughout your life from birth, if I may say that, up until your age now, like you have a lot of, if you look at it in the perspective of a book, which I know you've written, those chapters are your different lives. And you said your life changed every 3 to 5, 7 years, right? And you're the best example of an identity that's constantly changing, where one day you may wake up as a pilot in the friendly skies, right? That new identity, right?
Yeah.
And finding, and you've clearly, and so what strikes me again with you is that you've clearly found a way to embrace that you've empowered yourself to embrace that struggle or that transition. You're constantly transitioning, Stephen. You wake up today, Stephen, and you look around yourself, like, who are you? Who is your identity? And how do you look in the mirror at who Stephen Benedict is?
Yeah, that's a great question.